display here, and I want to introduce my wife, and there's going to be a couple other speakers here. But the reason we're here is because we are concerned with what's going on in our schools right now. We moved here from Seattle just a little over a year ago, and in Washington, a lot of the stuff that's happening now happened 10 years ago and 5 years ago. And it all came to light, and we saw it during the lockdowns with Zoom schooling. And it was right in our living room. We couldn't ignore it anymore. We saw the activists in the school system indoctrinating our own child. And 2 weeks after lockdown, when this first started, in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., the Washington State legislature met. And they were in there all night, and at 2 a.m. they passed a bill of comprehensive sex education. And they implemented a program that's designed by Planned Parenthood that puts in front of children all the way down to fourth grade graphic illustrations of sex positions, from gay sex positions all the way to straight, that kind of stuff. So talks of all kinds of deviant sexual practices is in the curriculum. And this actually went to the Washington State Supreme Court, because one of the candidates running for school board had in their write-up, they discussed what was in there, and it ended up in a lawsuit, and the Supreme Court ruled, yes, this is actually true, this is accurate, this is an accurate description. So this isn't hyperbole, this isn't exaggeration, this stuff is actually in the curriculum. After the election in 2020, when the legislature was able to retain their supermajority, and there was a ballot referendum to repeal this sex ed curriculum, it failed. And after that went down, they passed new legislation in Washington stripping away parental rights, where through the school nurses, coordinated by the schools, children as young as 11 can get transgender hormone therapy, coordinated through the school nurse, without the consent of the parents. The parents' insurance companies are forced to pay for this, and they're prohibited from informing the parents if this happens. If the parents are not into it, they will give them a costume change. They have a changing room. They'll change them into the clothes of their choice. They'll change their names on the school rolls and call them whatever name the kid wants to be called, all the way down to 11. Our own son, we pulled him out of school and tried to do homeschooling before moving here, after 3 consecutive book reports on transgender youth in 6th grade. Okay, this is the stuff we saw in our living room, and this is why this all happened, where we ended up pulling our kid out of school and moving, but because of that. That same bill allows girls as young as 13 to get abortions coordinated through the school nurse, paid for by the state if the parents don't have insurance, paid for by the parents' insurance if they do, and forbidding the parents from knowing about it. The same is true for drug treatment therapy. Kids as young as 13 can get treatment for being addicted to drugs without having their parents be involved. In the case of drug use or abortions, that benefits the abuser, whoever that may be. Okay, that's extremely harmful, long-term consequences, to the child involved. And this is the erosion of our rights, that's happening. And now we see, even right here in West Jordan, the middle school principal for a middle school, she was on a Zoom, National Education Association Zoom meeting, and I've clipped the video and shared it widely, and where she's advocating for creating gender transition plans for children in middle school without outing them to their parents. She wants to create plans involving the children and their educators and their medical caregivers. But she specifically notes that she's very concerned about doing this without outing them to their parents. Okay, this is happening right here in Utah. And this kind of divisive indoctrination is already in our school systems. It's already in the literature. It's already in the curriculum. And that's what my wife's going to be speaking on today. But this stuff is already here. We came here expecting safe haven. We came here thinking we're going to get back to, a better society and where my son can grow up the way that I did and learn that America is great, learn that we're the best nation in the world, where everybody has an opportunity to do anything that they want in their life. And instead what we found was the same stuff that we had witnessed in Washington State already here, and people openly deny it and say that it's not happening when it is happening right in front of our eyes. So without further rambling by me, my wife has a great presentation prepared, and take it away, Carrie. This is my lovely wife, Carrie Bartholomew.
Thanks. All right, today I want to talk about unpacking transformative language. And why I want to say focus on transformative language is because we had social and emotional learning before. Social and emotional learning, what most parents think it is teaching your kid just to have good manners, to be polite, to be respectful in school. Transformative means something very different. Leanne, can you switch to the next slide, please? So, castle. I used to say Cassell, so if anybody's followed me before, it's Castle. Castle is ran by Tim Shriver, who is also the head of, Special Olympics. And because it's Special Olympics, a lot of people embrace it and think, oh, this is a great idea. And so if Tim Shriver is doing it, we should absolutely get on board. He does not hide his progressive agenda. He openly states, I'm progressive. Well, progressives, they're natural wordsmiths. That means that they take our words and things that the kind of things that we would think are trustworthy, words like belonging, words like inclusive, words like kindness, and usurp them into something very different. Liam, next slide. So, Utahns often get caught up in wanting to appear kind. A lot of people say that the LDS religion especially is the religion of peace, a religion of kindness. Sometimes that peace, sometimes that kindness can become compliance. Sometimes we are so afraid to take a stand because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings or we don't want to appear unloving. And I think it's very useful to remember that love is not always it's not always gentle. Sometimes sometimes love is pointing out what's wrong. Next slide. So we have a culture of compliance here, where when you are part of the predominant faith, oftentimes you are told, don't reject a calling, accept anything that comes your way. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, kind of a culture, and that makes us a particular target for a lot of the things that are going on. Next slide. So, as Adam said, Utah is supposed to be the state of family values. What I have found in the year and a half that we've been here is that so many of the warriors are people from California, are people from Oregon, and are people from Washington who are saying, wait a second, we moved here, we gave up everything we had to be here because we believed that our families would be protected. I remember a particular scripture that talked about being a peculiar people, and that peculiar people requires that we stand up when things are wrong, even if that means that the world looks at us, as weirdos. We're still supposed to do what is right, and especially when it comes to our families, we're supposed to value that family bond. And what we're seeing today is we're seeing an attack on the family. We're seeing a dismissal of parental roles. Recently, the school district decided to remove the parental roles in terms of pornography in schools, in terms of having an advisory board. They just silently removed the parental roles in our school district. Next. Go ahead, next. So, some of the ways that Utah has been compromised. One district is being held hostage by the Department of Justice. What happened, and what I mean by this, is that there was a little girl who committed suicide. And when they did the research, they found out that this little girl, who was 8 years old, it was not because of racism. You can do all of the work. Even KSL cannot find that it was because of racism this little girl committed suicide. But the DOJ is now in charge of the school, to the point that every single child has to turn in information about their race. And if a child is convicted of bullying a protected class, which doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, shouldn't all children be part of a protected class? But we now have protected classes that they are allowed to act out, but non-protected children, it will be on their permanent record. I use the word abhorrent because Washington County used the word abhorrent when they looked at the school books. The books that have stories of, and I do have a teenager in here, so I'm going to try to be as delicate as I can, but stories of incest, stories of sex trafficking, stories of women having affairs with high school students. We have those books in our schools in great graphic detail. We have pictures in some of these books, and we have parents in Utah that are fighting to get these books put back into our schools. They were just removed from some of the districts, not ours. Our district has not removed these books, but another district has. So that's some of the things that we're facing right now. And we have equity teams going to our schools and doing equity audits. So what you have to understand is that equity, a lot of people believe that equity and equality are the same thing. But what equity is rebranded socialism. That means that if you talk to any of them, the goal is equal outcomes for every single child. So if you think about in your own family, if you have more than one child, I only have one, so whatever outcome he's gonna have. But if you think about in your own family, you've got one child who wakes up early and is super ambitious and is gonna go after the world, right? And then you've got another child who's like, and they don't want to do anything, right? Go after the world, right? They're not gonna have the same outcomes. So now we are pushing, right now in our schools, they're pushing for, on Friday actually, the removal of honors classes. So the removal of kids to be able to compete. When we came here and we looked at our schools, I loved these murals of the Constitution in every single school. And I was like, oh, this is great. And then I started looking at curriculum posted on the walls, and I saw like the recommended books for middle schoolers. They would not have worked for a family. Whether that means that they were too high or they were too low, they would not have worked because every single child is different, and we should be looking at that word, where it means that we have different things for different people. We should be looking at that for our children, not making them all the same. Why do we want to make them all the same? Next. So, like I said before, children are being divided into protected and unprotected classes. Here in Utah, here in Nebo School District, we have GSAs. Well, that's the Gay Straight Alliance. The Gay Straight Alliance sounds wonderful. Sounds like great. Let's not be mean to people who happen to identify differently. It tends to be something different. It tends to push an ideology, and it tends to celebrate the protected class and actually bully those people who do not fit into it. And lastly, for this part, the state school board is considering removing religion and creed as a protected class. So here's one example of something to do with that, and that ties in with the pronouns. A young woman 2 years ago at her school in Nebo was given the surveys, and these surveys, these panorama surveys, they ask pretty invasive questions, and they're also kind of leading. And so the first question is what's your pronouns? What do you identify as? And she responded, this goes against my religion. I don't want to participate in this. And she stood up against this for quite a while. Fast forward 2 years, this girl has been bullied so much that she is now taking hormones herself and has shaved her head. And she told her parents, I just want to make it stop. There's another child who in Springville was bullied for not being gay in the drama club, and he's graduated, and he doesn't. It's really hard for him because he likes theater, and theater oftentimes leads towards being around a lot of people with alternative lifestyles. My background is in theater. I've always found it that we could be accepting of people, but now there's a pressure, and there's an ideology that has been taken up. There's another story currently going on in Davis County where the drama teacher is the one who's abusing the kid. The drama teacher is the one who is flat out, when they first come into class, they have to agree that they're going to use pronouns. That's compelled speech. It shouldn't be legal. Now we're looking at removing religion and creed. Why would they do that? Next, please. So how is this happening in Utah? Well, we have a progressive governor and his wife, and they buy into this kindness. Go ahead, keep going. Castle.org. Sorry, I often say Castle, but it's Castle. So Castle.org. Castle changed the way that it presents social and emotional learning 2 years ago. Next slide, please. So last month, Abby Cox brought in Tim Schreiber to Utah and spoke to a bunch of teachers. You have to understand, teachers are the most compassionate, they go into that profession not to get rich, right? Like, they go into that profession because they genuinely love kids, or at least they did. I don't know what the new group that's coming in. It seems like they're coming in to radicalize kids, but I believe the teachers before have come in because they genuinely love kids. Next slide, please. So, in what ways does SEL advance equity and excellence? Back to the top, we'll ignore that. Social and emotional learning can be a powerful lever for creating caring, just, inclusive, and healthy schools that support all young people. Well, the question when I was just reading that is, who decides what's just? We have lots of social justice pushing in our schools. When I look at social justice as a person of color, I do not align with a lot of the things that they are saying. I do not believe that social justice means that we need to lower our expectations for some kids. I do not believe that we should have retaliatory punishments where white children are punished more because in the past Black and Hispanic children have been punished more. In the context of SEL, equity and excellence refers to every student across race, ethnicity, family income levels, learning abilities, home language, immigration status, gender identity, sexual orientation, and other factors. They want to take control and make us all think and agree with the same things. So social and emotional learning, they will say, oh, we want different perspectives, but as we'll find out in a little bit, that they don't want different perspectives. They want different looking faces, but the perspectives are not the same. Next slide, please. Again, you can read all of this, but what stands out to me is best serve all students. How do they decide what best serves all students? Once again, we're all human beings. Every single one of us is different. We're gonna differ in some things. So how do they decide what best serves all students? Especially when Castle has openly said that that religion can be a threat. Religion is something that needs to be disrupted. So, SEL helps stakeholders develop the skills and relationships to communicate and collaborate effectively across different perspectives and backgrounds. Next slide, please. Well, I'm going to go really quickly to here. More inclusive, just, and equitable world. Again, they are the only ones deciding what is inclusive, what is just, and what is equitable. And if you think that every single person wants, that every person is going to be equitable, that is a lie. I mean, we have politicians trading and making billions of dollars, right? We have politicians trading and making billions of dollars in trade, and yet they're saying that we're all going to be equitable. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be making $1 billion or several. And then this word, sense of belonging. Does it make you feel fuzzy? Makes you feel great, right? Sense of belonging among all adults and peers. This requires making sure that educational policies treat students fairly and that all students have caring teachers who believe that they can succeed. To support all students, SEL. All students, adults need to understand their own biases and expectations, develop awareness of students' cultures and backgrounds. So let me give you a little story about this. A couple of months ago, I was invited to Utah Valley University to speak to a group of social workers. In this group, they asked me, well, first off, the subject was critical race theory, how it should be implemented in K through 12 schools. So when they say it's not here, they're lying. They're flat out lying. So when we look at their expectations or their experiences of cultural diversity, they already have an idea of what we have to be if we're in this cultural group. I worked last month at the cherry plant because I want to have an influence on teenagers. And so I used Peter Boghossian, who is a former teacher who recently, I don't know if he was fired or he quit because of all of the woke nonsense, but he's a very liberal, he's a very liberal educator at Portland. So obviously Portland, very liberal, they go hand in hand. And so what he's doing now is he's going to different universities and he's asking the teenagers, he's asking the students questions. And he has them step on the line and say, do you agree with this? One of the questions, and I asked the kids this, I said, so does racism of the past justify racism today towards the other direction? And I listened to the kids' answers, and I said, this is a safe space. Anybody can have whatever responses they want to. And we just did this at lunch. And what the kids were saying and their perspectives that in Utah, African Americans can only have the low-paying jobs. They literally believe that. I serve on a board with some of the most wealthy African Americans in Utah, and but our kids think that African Americans can only have the low-paying jobs. Where did that come from? At UVU, when I was talking to the professor, one of the students, the grad students, raised his hand and he said, so how do I grade papers without considering my own racial bias towards our kids? And I'm sitting there and I said, well, you have a rubric. You have a rubric. You have a grade book. These two things should make it. And he goes, I guess I could erase their names. So we're teaching our young people to embrace racism under the name of anti-racism. Next slide, please. CASEL's work promotes partnerships among schools, families, and communities in order to prioritize what is best for their children and their communities. Who decides what's best? Who decides what's best? SEL can support young people and adults in reflecting on and expressing their perspectives, listening and building connections with those who have different viewpoints and experiences. That sounds great. And working together for collective goals. Next slide, please. Remember the term collected. Okay. CASEL is refining a specific form of social and emotional learning implementation that concentrates social and emotional practices on transforming equitable settings and systems. Keep going, please. And this is how SEL looks in Australia today. They wear monitors all day so that it's not only about their written responses, but it's also about how they feel when they're shown certain pictures. I had somebody who's going into med school now who was given a black box test. And the test was, they said it cannot be hacked. The only thing that it does is determines whether or not you're a good person. So it would show him a picture of people, queered people, or it would show him a picture of like obese people. And it would gauge his response on those to decide whether or not he was a good person. Go ahead, next. Progressives, and I'm trying to be as generous as I can here. There's many other words I could use, but progressives are authoritarian. They fully believe they have the best ideas and that if we follow them, we'll reach utopia. I had this happen to me in Washington where my friends would tell me, oh, you just don't understand your plight. You just don't understand where it is that you're coming from in life and how racist society is to you. And I'm like, well, I mean, really? I don't know how the world reacts to the color of my skin. I don't understand the struggles that I've had in life, and I've had a lot. I've had enough to write a book or a movie of those exceptional struggles in life. But what I don't condone, one, is the idea that people say that because I've had those struggles, and for anyone who doesn't know, I'm a 9 on the ACEs. I've experienced every kind of abuse that you can imagine. The ACEs scale is adverse childhood effects of trauma. So I've experienced everything that a child can experience except for having someone killed in front of me. When I was 8 years old, I put myself in foster care. I aged out of foster care. That's my background. I'm not okay with people telling me I'm a victim because that doesn't help me overcome. And this is one of the reasons that I'm so strongly against the idea of social and emotional learning and telling kids that they fit into boxes, because they don't. And when they do, when you put them in a box, then they don't feel like they can step out. And that's kind of the goal, to make sure that they never step out of their boxes. Next, please. Our district has embraced SEL. This last spring, we were invited, and over 300 parents went to preview SEL at our local schools. Here's some examples of what we saw. Next, please. This is identity. This is intersectionality right here. Intersectionality is coined by a woman named Kimberly Crenshaw. Kimberly Crenshaw is also coined the term critical race theory. So when we say it's not here, so how this looks, this is identity politics, and what this teaches our kids is that they need to write all of their points of intersectionality, and there's so much more. Kimberly Crenshaw literally says that there should be so many differences, as many as the stars in the sky. Okay, doesn't necessarily seem like a bad thing to know all of this stuff about yourself, to be self-aware, except for when you have to highlight those points as privilege and not privilege. Next screen, please. This is what curriculum for K through 5 looks like. One of the options. This is called In Focus. Next slide. This program, or the story, was called What is a Citizen? We have a citizen can join a cause, have an African American child, although somebody told me, oh, they're blue, how do you know they're African American? But you have a child with their fists up in the air. You have no trumpets. My son pointed out that she's actually carrying a trumpet. Now here's the trick with that. No trumpets. Coming from Washington State, trumpets were people who voted for Donald Trump. So this is political, okay? But when you as a parent go in and say, hey, this is political, they can say, oh no, it's not, it's just about a trumpet. So it's a manipulation. It's a subtle kind of, can he really argue this point? Next. So I don't know what you guys saw in that. Would you, just a show of hands, would you find that offensive if your child were shown that? By the way, this social and emotional learning is 10 minutes a day, every single day in schools. Is it an hour now? They have an hour of social and emotional learning? Apparently they have an hour now of social and emotional learning every day, but I thought originally it was supposed to be 10 minutes every day.
I'll have to double check that.
Adding up to an hour.
It might be an hour.
It's
an hour a week.
An hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's an hour.
Yes.
It might be an hour
Okay.
a week.
Let's move to the next slide, please. The collective perspective. The collective means that you must fit into a group. So I've found myself being elevated to a spot where I'm invited to speak with senators and to speak in front of the state school board and just different opportunities. One opportunity that we were at, the senators, they were deciding whether or not to pass a divisive concepts bill. And what they said is, we recognize that there are minorities in the room, but you do not speak for your collective. It's pretty bigoted in my opinion. Next. Understanding belonging. Belonging is a huge word that you're going to hear a lot. We just want to foster their sense of belonging. We just want to be kind. When parents have gone and said, we don't want this in our schools, they've said, well, we just want to focus on kindness. We're like, look, but your kindness and your pushing of this versus these people who feel differently on this side, so you are only accepting one side. What you have to understand about belonging is not tolerance. Belonging is not just saying, okay, you do you, like the posters used to say, right? It's not saying, okay, you do you. Belonging is acceptance, affirmation, and celebration. And if you don't do all of those things as a teacher, you are risking your job. If you don't do all of those things as a student, there were students who walked by the GSA club, two boys, they walked by the GSA club. One of them says to the other one, I don't know, I just don't get the gay thing. They're now on a permanent bullying list at one of our schools. Just for saying, I don't know, I just don't get the gay thing. However, gay people and black people, people of every color, are acting up in classes. And teachers are saying, I am afraid to do anything about it because I don't want to be considered a bigot. And so the kids they're ticked. The kids are very upset because they're sitting there going, why am I even trying? I'm sitting here trying to do my work in seminary. I'm trying to do my work in history. Kids are coming in wearing flags. We have fights between MAGA wearing kids and the LGBTQIA crowd wearing their stuff and literally fighting in our schools. And we're told that we just need to be accepting, affirming, and kind. But it only goes one way. Next screen, please. So who's protected? Like I said, we have kids who can't even sing and dance and act because if they're not gay, they do not belong. And teachers are okay with doing that. we have kids who, I mean, I had a little first grader in my class last year, and he was like, I picked up Sleeping Beauty to read, and he's like, I don't want a princess book, that's for girls. That's what little boys do. And you would be shamed for that in some of these classes. That's a problem. And I have little girls who do the same thing. I don't want to read Peter Pan. So go ahead, next. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is another thing you're going to hear. You're going to hear whether or not a person is pro diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI. I love what Jordan Peterson says, DEI must die. Diversity, equity, and inclusion means exactly the opposite. There is no diversity of thought. Equity does not mean equal opportunities for anyone, and inclusion only if you fit into your box. Next page.
Only if you fit into their box.
In their box, yes. Which is your box in terms of like, do I fit into the African American box? And I don't. So again, equity is not equality of opportunity, but rather a rebranding of socialism. Next, please. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
A little further,
Yes.
equity of outcome is what they're after.
Equity of outcome for every.
Not equity of opportunity.
No. Go ahead, next. So anything that can possibly trigger a child must be dismantled or purged. Here's the thing about social and emotional learning. They are constantly saying that social and emotional learning is going to build resilience in our children. I'm not sure, I can't remember if it is Karl Marx or the book Rules for Radicals, but they say accuse people of doing what you are doing while you are doing it to cause confusion. Lying is a part of the game. And so when they say that they're building resilience, they are making our children weak. If you can't handle being triggered, we have kids in classes right now, and I want to clarify this because I get this all the time. People say, are there really litter boxes in our schools? Not that I'm aware of. And I think we have to be careful on spreading that rumor without proof, because as soon as we say something that is untrue, we've lost all credibility. But what there is in our schools, what there is in our junior highs and our high school, are people who identify as their cat self. There are literally kids in class who meow at each other. And teachers act like it's normal. And they make your children act like it's normal. Next. I don't need to say anything with this one. Next. We are teaching our children to look through lenses. So what that means is that instead of just seeing the fact in front of you, you're supposed to see the facts through, I see the fact as a female. I see the fact as a black female. I see the fact as a black Christian female. And on and on and on it goes. And so instead of just going, the sky is blue. Well, the sky is blue, but it was, it has that tint of whatever. And I see it a little bit different because it's very confusing, and it really kind of wastes the time of learning. And we have such a precious time to teach our kids anything. And it just wastes the time of learning because they have to look at it through whatever lens. And specifically, those lenses are lenses of oppression. Next slide, please. Collectivity. If you don't see, again, and I'm hitting this over and over and over again, but collectivity is important. I'll explain why in a second. But if you don't see things through the lens that you are told that you must see lenses through, then you are othered. You are depersoned. You literally have no value. This is a problem with social and emotional learning, is that you literally have to be, you are a white male, you see the world this way. I am a black female, I see the world this way, and you have to. And if you don't, you have no value. And there's nothing more bigoted than erasing people because they don't fit into the lens that you think they should fit into. I'm going to be real clear here on Governor Cox, because he definitely has that lens. And his wife, her specialties, the things that she's most focused on, are social and emotional learning and foster care. I'm kind of an expert in both of those things. And despite the fact that I've been able to speak to all sorts of people, she is not interested in hearing my voice. Instead, she listens to the voices of people who grew up quite wealthy in Davis County, all of them middle and upper middle class African Americans, who do not give African Americans from, say, Ogden the time of day. So these people are the experts. These are the people that are going into our schools and telling our teachers in teacher trainings, oh, if you compliment me because you like my hair, that's a microaggression. What is that doing for relationships?
That happened right here in Murray City School District. They held a conference. I've clipped the video out where they say that complimenting somebody's hair or complimenting that somebody speaks eloquently is a dangerous microaggression.
Which is kind of funny, because when I was on PBS, they told me I spoke eloquently. And I was just like, interesting, because they don't really believe what they're saying, and there's a grift. I'm just going to be really honest. There is a grift to this. When you're making $8,000 a month to find racism in our schools, guess what you're going to find? You're going to find racism in our schools. And when I go to them and I say, I have an idea on how we can approach racism, because it is real. I had a Venezuelan kid tell me on the cherry plant he hates white people. And I'm like, how do we deal with this in a healthy and positive way and let kids have their say? And all we have to do is sit them in a room and say to them, talk. Everybody just be quiet and listen. Talk. And then you know what you're going to find? You're going to find common threads. They don't want to find common threads. And that's what critical race theory is about. They don't want to find common threads. They want us consistently divided. Next, please. And grievances. I heard about Paulo Freire from teachers here in Nebo School District. 2 teachers came up to me and said, well, have you read Pedagogy of the Oppressed? I highly recommend that you read Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Paulo Freire is a Brazilian educator who screwed up his system. I'm sorry, I'm way blunt, but that's what he did. He screwed up his system, because instead of saying that kids need to learn, especially young kids need to learn through the banking system of education, this idea that we are constantly giving them information, because this is the way that they learn when they're little, and they are sponges. Instead, we need to take that down, and we need to find out all of the reasons why they can't learn. Children can. Anyone can. Anyone can. And one of the biggest problems with this whole mess is that we are forgetting to look at people as individuals. Again, with the word collectivity. Because if we look at a child and we don't consider their race, we don't consider their poverty, and we just say, what needs does this person have? And we go after those needs, then our children can thrive. And I know this because we used to be foster parents. And we would get kids who would come in and they could not do anything academically. I mean, some of them barely spoke, some of them, I mean, all sorts of things, just terrific things. And by the time they left, they could read. So trauma, because I'll say, oh, trauma-informed behavioral issues, all of these things, they're going to hinder the child being able to learn. Not if you look at them as an individual and meet their needs. Next. The point is chaos. The point of all of this is utter chaos. Next slide, please. So this word right here, we are teaching our children to queer themselves. Make sure I spelled that word right. Queering, and I'm going to say this really clearly in case anybody gets upset online. Queering is not an anti-gay phrase. Queering is not about saying that homosexuality is wrong or bad. Queering is othering our kids. Queering is getting them to look at everything that we consider normal and turning that into rejecting it, rejecting everything that we consider to be normal. And this is not the first time in history that this has happened. Next slide, please. That could be an example of our high schools. Next slide, please. They want to destroy the nuclear family. And this gets personal because they've done this to African Americans since the 1930s. Since the 1930s, they have whispered in the African American's ear, you can't do it. It's impossible for you to achieve. We need to help you. And now they want to do it to all children. It's like they studied and they said, oh, this worked. Okay, we got the fathers out of the household. Okay, we made abortion super easy and approachable. We've done all of these things, and now let's bring it on to everybody else. Next slide, please. And this is where it originally comes from. This is called the Four Olds. And if you look at the pictures, and I specifically did this in the next slide in a certain way. So they wanted to get rid of old thoughts, old cultures, old customs, and old habits. This was the Red Guard in China. So queering is about teaching our children to reject societal norms. Next one, slide please. And it looks an awful lot like it does today, doesn't it? We have tearing down statues. We just have angry people. And again, I'm going to repeat that. Queering is about teaching our children to reject societal norms. This is our goal. One of the most confusing things about this is why in the world would Nebo embrace this? Nebo, I mean, we literally moved here because it was supposed to be the most conservative district. So why do we embrace this? Because it's an ideology. Quite frankly, this is a cult. And they've taken our teachers, and I have had teachers tell me this. They will not tell me it. They will not be public about it. I've asked them, I've said, can I turn off the lights and interview you, you know, where nobody knows who you are? And they're like, no, I'm not. I won't do that. But what I will tell you is that we are being trained to be anti-parent. And at the same time that they're being trained to be anti-parent, they're also being told that they're the heroes. They're the change agents. They're the ones who can make a difference for our kids and for our world. Next slide, please. And this is how it starts. It starts when we go back to school, our kids having things passed out to them and that just say, accept pronouns, because pronouns are kind. We want to make sure that everybody feels welcome, so use your pronouns. Next slide, please. And this is where it goes to. And that's not being hyperbolic. I interviewed Mike Smith, the sheriff, and I asked him about Antifa, and he said, oh, they'll never come here. And then I saw social and emotional learning is coming here. And these kids, and I know this, again, because we came here from Washington State, okay? The kids were wholesome and happy kids a few years before. And a couple of years in school, with a grievance, with a constant, you should be bitter, the world is evil, not the world, let me clarify that, America is evil, lessons, that's going to be in our streets. And if you don't think so, ooh, I'm going to make somebody mad right now. Go to Smith's. go to the freaking grocery store. And you will see that there are people who are embracing this. Write something controversial on Facebook and see how many people start just attacking you. You must be, literally, I got this last week, you must be a cisgendered white person. Like, oh no. And I'm like, my Bitmoji is pretty clear that that's not who I am, but okay. Go ahead, next. So, almost wrapping up, but what can we do? What can we do about this? Because it is here. So, what can we do? Next. Well, the first thing that you do is you draw your line in the sand. And you say, at what point am I going to say no? My line's already in the sand. I'm very much a not happening. I have my son in a charter school. I love my charter school. The president has openly come out and said, critical race theory has no point. SEL is very politically driven. No. I would say if your school doesn't do that, get your kids out. So, but if you can't, because a lot of people can't, then you need to think about how to fortify your home. What I am always telling people is just take this little mantra, not in my home, not in my school, and not in my community. Next slide, please.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, yes.
Do you know what the percentage is for in our school district, for instance, of parents who are doing homeschooling?
I know it's getting larger, but I do not know what the numbers are. But I can try to find out for you.
Well, nationwide, homeschooling groups have doubled in the last 2 to 3 years.
Well, and that's something that we need to be careful of, because the federal government does want its hands in homeschool. They do want to make sure that homeschools they will only be accepted if they're teaching the same things that the public schools are.
Well, I see a problem with that, because then the kids that are in school are just going to be totally brainwashed, and then you'll have the homeschool. So our nation will just be even more divided, and so that doesn't solve the problem to homeschool.
Yeah, well, we could win this if when we went back to school, classes were empty. If classes were empty for a month, that would make our school board go, wait a second, what's wrong here? Something is wrong. So we could win it with that. Next. Next, we need to fortify our families. We need to go backwards. So we need to have less tech and my son was flipping the pages and he's 14. And we just need to say, look, I love you too much to let your whole life be technology. And we need to go backwards and especially find interests for them that have nothing to do with tech. Because just one example, they were doing a Minecraft, a Roblox game. Some child was doing a Roblox game. And when another child said, I identify as a horse, and this person said, no, you're a boy, he was blocked off Roblox for 2 weeks. This is conditioning our kids to never say no to things. Next. We need to teach them age-appropriate truth. One thing that I would do if you have little kids at home is I would go out and get a copy or get on YouTube and watch The Emperor's New Clothes before school starts. And I would talk to your kids about why would they lie? They were afraid they were going to lose their job. They were afraid, and if they're like gory kids, like my first graders were, they could get your heads cut off. What can you tell these kids to let them understand that sometimes people lie because they're afraid? And even have that conversation. Sometimes teachers lie because they're afraid, because they have their home and they don't want to lose their home. They have their reputation. They teach in Sunday school. There's all of these reasons why they might not want to have their reputation damaged. Limit tech, I already said, and make a commitment to being involved. I do highly move towards pod schools personally. I love my charter school. My charter school ends in 9th grade, so I've got to figure out my next plan. But make a commitment to being involved, whatever that means. Sub in those classrooms. It is so easy to sub. in Utah. You do not even have to have a degree. You can just go in and you can be a positive influence on those kids, because you want to know what real social and emotional learning is? It's seeing these kids, like making them feel like they are valued just because they are them. And when they come up to you and they say, oh, I like to wear dresses, you're like, great, what did you have for dinner last night? Like you just keep going right on to the next thing of like, what's important about you as a human being? The rest of your points of intersectionality, and you're valued because you're you. And if we do that, we don't need all this other stuff. We have a problem with parents kind of thinking that technology is a perfectly fine babysitter. We have a problem with parents not supporting teachers, which is why teachers are begging for SEL. They say, we have all of these problems, but we can fix this by making sure that kids know that they matter. So when they say Black Lives Matter and Queer Lives Matter and whatever else matters, no, you matter, just you. That's good. Next. That. A year ago I said this and I upset some people, but this is real. And this is why I am concerned about whether or not school, I mean, if we can fix school, it's great. But if they're going to teach them to be activists, then we have to teach them to be counter-activists. Our kids have to know so much more than I ever wanted my son to know. I never wanted my son to have conversations about race. This one looks like he's a freaking leprechaun off of a boat in Ireland. And I never wanted him to have conversations about race and racism. And now he laughs about it. He flat out's like, racism. Because when it means, when everything is it, then nothing is it. And so we have to fortify our kids. We have to let them know that if you stand up, if that's the choice you make, you might be bullied. You might have teachers who want you expelled. You will have a target on your back. Is that what you're prepared to do? And if it's not, that's okay too. If it's not, then you just know that I am your person. And when you get home at night, you tell me everything that happened, because we are a team. And I will support you, and we will find the truth. If you've got questions, we will find the truth if I don't already know it. But I am your person. Because teachers are being taught they are their person. And that's a problem. Next. So I think we win this by building community, life skills, and interests that have nothing to do, again, with big tech. And the reason that I say big tech is because if you look at who runs Castle, you get Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. That's who runs our tech. And their degrees aren't even in like computer science. Their degrees are in social engineering.
A question.
Yes.
Clarify what Castle is. I've never even heard of it before.
It's the collaborative of academics for the social and emotional learning. It's just a group of researchers, teachers, policymakers, and they've, for the last 25, 30 years, they've been looking at evidence-based, best practice ways of teaching these skills. And for the last 25 to 30 years, it's been okay. But in 2019, they transferred over to something called Transformative SEL. And while you've been talking, I have their page up right now.
Good.
As soon as you were done, I wanted to
No, I'll let
read
you.
exactly from their website what the core features of Transformative SEL are.
Perfect. I think we're just about, is there one more? Okay. This. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. We are here. I would like to stop it before we get to here. And the only way that we're going to stop it is if everybody in this room commits to talking to another person. And it's okay if they look at you like you're weird. the school board acts like I'm going to hit them when I walk in, and it's ridiculous because I walk in like this, always hold my hands like this, because guess what? As a Black woman, I never want to be considered the angry Black woman. So I work really hard, like probably 3 times harder than anybody else, at not being the angry Black woman. That's the reality. That's my lived experience. And I will not say the person's name, but one particular person does this when I walk in, literally. So, and this is the last part for me, and then I'll have Chris talk, and then I'll have Ben talk, and then if you would like to talk. Okay, so I went into Stokes, and because I talked to absolutely everyone I can about this, I was talking to a young woman at the stand, and she said, my cashier, and she was, I think she's a junior, and she said, we all know this is wrong. We all know that this is divisive. They are always talking about inclusivity, but they are really dividing us more and more and more. My question is, when are our parents going to stand up? We have to stand up.
That was the girl's question.
That was the girl's question to me. And we have to stand up to change the trajectory. We have this much time. When I was with James Lindsay on a platform, he said 1.5 years max is what we have to stop this trajectory. And that was 4 months ago. So we have very, very little time. But again, we could stop it overnight if we could wake up our neighbors. All right, that's my part. Now, because as some people like to say that no one should speak if they're not an expert, we have an expert. We have Dr. Chris Mars. Wait, she's gone. She's out.
No,
Okay.
there's, I just